Hello everybody, this is Umberto with a cold open here just to tell you about a really cool project that a friend of the show, Marco from Storia d'Italia, has recently released. Since we're looking at the time of Khosrow I, Marco and his team have worked together to write a graphic novel about what was going on at the same time over in Italy. This comic is based on real history as it centers around a ring that was found, a wedding ring such as you and I could wear, which had the name of a Roman man and a Gothic noblewoman. And we are led to wonder what happened if they never came back for it eventually, and how did that influence the life of all the people around them. Now, the graphic novel is called Ammianus Vesper Mundi, and you can have it in 3 languages, depending on what you prefer. You can have English, Italian, or even Latin if you want to practice your Latin as well. If you want to buy this graphic novel, you need to go to www.nubes.live to buy it in any of the 3 languages. The link will be in the description of this episode. I finished reading the book and I really enjoyed it. I've always been fascinated by what it must have been to live during the end of an age, and I think that they really captured that atmosphere extremely well. And going through it with the life of the main character of the story was a brilliant experience where you can see both the melancholy of the world that is fading away and hope for the future that is coming into being despite everything. So thank you very much for Marco and his team for having made all this, and I heartily encourage any of you to check it out. Now, on to the episode.
Hello, and welcome to So You Think You Can Rule Persia, the podcast where we rate and review all the kings of Persia from Diocles to Yazdegerd III. I'm Sariel, and my pronouns are they, them.
And I'm Umberto, my pronouns are he, him. Hello everybody, and welcome to episode 82.2, Khosrow I, Part 2.
Correct.
So, just to be very clear, if you're starting from this episode, maybe don't. Maybe start from the previous one.
We appreciate it, but you need
missing
some context. Yes.
So, you can come back here after you listen to the previous one. It's good, I promise.
We'll still be here.
Yes. But yeah, so we're gonna pick up where we last left off. We had a bunch of wars going on before, a bunch of plots, a bunch of clashes with Rome. And today we're going to figure out a lot of the internal work that Khosrow was doing for the empire. How did he reform it? How did he try and fix everything? And, well, how his life ends. And then we'll rate him at the very end.
Mm-hmm.
So, Sarah, what do you remember from last time? It was a while since we've recorded, but are there any salient points that come to mind?
Oh, God.
When you look at Khosrow I, Part 1.
I actually don't remember much other than he was kicking ass. My mind is blank. It's been so long too, because we have recorded a bunch of episodes at once, and then I had to leave for a while. So,
So yeah, basically the main points. We'll go on a more detailed recap later, but the main subject of this was that Khosrow, he started out, he dueled with Justinian a bunch, had a bunch of wars in Rome, built Khosrow's better Antioch. Then he managed to destroy the Hephthalites, conquer Yemen, stabilize the empire, build a bunch of cool things, and now he just wants to reform the empire more so it works better, and will just continue to complete the reforms of Kavad. Also, at the same time, he absolutely annihilated the Mazdakites and anybody who threatened him.
Right.
So, plenty of stuff. And also, yeah, he started engaging in some fake history by writing a bunch of religious propaganda that worked for the model of government he was trying to implement. So, yeah, there we go.
Bit of a Darius.
Yes. Do you think he is actually going to end well and successfully, or do you think that he's reached a peak and he's going to just come crashing down? What is your feeling based on how things have gone so far?
Well, we have an entire second episode, so I assume it's not immediately everything goes terribly. but
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. I don't feel super positive on like how long his reign is going to last. Like I don't think this is the start of another golden age. I don't know why. That's the vibe I'm getting. So things might go down. I mean, at some point, right? Things might go down, and then I'm not sure if his heir will live up to the task, or if we will go into some period of civil war. So I guess we'll see.
Yes, having to pick an heir is definitely going to be an important part of this.
I hope
We'll
I'm
see how
entirely
well
wrong,
that
but
goes.
I'm not feeling optimistic.
Alright, so let's just give a brief recap in slightly more detail than I did before. So Khosrow I is the son of Kavad. He took the throne early on as a young man. He was 17 or 19. He had a rebellion by his brother who tried to take over for the Mazdakites. Khosrow killed his brother, all his brothers, and all the rebels, and then negotiated a peace with the Romans. The Eternal Peace, if you remember, that lasted 8 years.
Yeah. The eternal peace that was not very eternal, but
Yes. Then Khosrow decided to deal with the core of the empire. He continued some of the reforms of Kavad, which we'll see a little bit more today. And then what he did is he had a large series of wars. So when the Romans were concentrating on reconquering the West, Khosrow broke the Eternal Peace, invaded Syria, and managed to conquer Antioch and transport it bodily to the outskirts of Ctesiphon.
Right, that was such a flex.
That was nice.
But also we broke the peace ourselves, which, like, come on.
Yes,
guys.
true. What you gonna do? The war continued and extended for a while. It extended into the Lazic War, lasted for several years. In the end, the peace was mostly sort of a status quo, as in the Romans said, okay, we'll pay you a bunch of money to not attack us anymore. And so Justinian made his last peace before dying.
Right.
In the east, instead, we managed to destroy the Hephthalites, the terrible, scary nomads that had killed Peroz and imprisoned Kavad. They are gone. But to destroy them, we made a deal with these new people, the Turks.
We are making the same mistakes over and over.
Yes, but we're moving slightly further east, and hopefully that'll be fine this time.
So how do the Turks get to Constantinople?
Well, it will take them... And how long are they going to be there? 900 years.
Okay, so nowhere near yet.
It's going to take a while, yes.
Okay,
a lot of things are going to happen in the meantime. But, these are very distant ancestors. Then Khosrow also restructured a lot of the empire. He built an academy with a great library, an academy of Gondishapur, with a library from areas across the world. He hosted refugee philosophers from the Roman Empire.
Yes, true. He was big into education and academy, and he imported scholars essentially.
Yes, that's right. So imported them from the West and the East and India, who was going through its own golden age of mathematics and science, which is great. And then Khosrow also built the massive Takakisra. He built this giant reception hall where he would receive all the dignitaries from across the empire and beyond. And then finally, he managed to conquer Yemen so that all the routes from east to west on the Silk Road are now under Iranian control. So nobody trades that we don't want to, and we can trade with everybody as long as we like. So brilliant times all round. Oh, also, we ended up with the year 570 being important because Muhammad is also born in Mecca.
That happened.
That'll be relevant. But not yet.
You could make a
religion
religion
We got a bunch
out
of
this.
Terrifying omens for the end of the Sassanid Empire, but hey, not yet. So there we go. Now, what are we going to do this episode? Well, this episode, we're going to skip all the wars. We're going to assume they're going on in the background, and we're going to look at what is Khosrow doing inside the empire.
Okay, nice. Yeah, because we've been looking a lot outside, other than knowing that there was all of this academia happening, which obviously I assume will affect the empire. We've been looking at what we're doing with the Romans and taking care of rebellions and things like that. So what is in the empire?
So Khosrow has noticed that there are many elements wrong with the empire. And he wants to fix everything.
Right. overachiever.
Yes. On the economic side, the Sassanid Empire had never been fully monetized. So silver coins were regularly minted, but not used by the common people usually.
Mm-hmm.
So an example for this is the payment of a professional army, which seems to have been made through either rations or grants of land. They were paid more in kind rather than receiving a monthly salary, for example. They were told, okay, fight with us for X years. We will pay your food and lodging. And then when you're done, you can have a nice field somewhere in Mesopotamia where you can live out your retirement.
Mm-hmm.
But as a consequence of this not full monetization, taxation is based on getting a certain percentage of the yearly crops, as assessed by royal tax collectors.
Not a huge fan.
Yes. And this was generally added to a poll tax that each person had to pay, and it would generally be in coin, but could also be in kind if not available.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a baseline you pay because you're a person in the empire, and then you pay a percentage of how much your field made, for example.
I see.
Now, there are several problems with this system. So, one of these were the fact that the revenue of the state was calculated every year newly. So, the state can't properly plan for long-term expenses. So, if I'm dependent on, is it going to rain properly this year?
Yeah, right.
Then, I can't plan to say, oh, in January, I'm going to build 16 bridges because we'll have that money. You can just say, I have a priority list of things I could make depending on how well the year goes.
Of course.
But it's difficult to plan for something ambitious and especially long term. Also, the problem is that farmers would have to wait for the tax collector to come and assess their crops before they could be properly stored. And this would often cause some crops to go bad or otherwise suffer because you're just waiting for the tax collector to finish their job.
Oh, that must have been the most incredibly annoying thing ever.
Yes, absolutely. And this is all just for the lands directly owned by the king. This is all the lands under royal authority. If they're the lands of rich people or nobles, there's extra space for corruption or middlemen taking their cut. So it's a very inefficient system.
Oh, what a shame.
To, gather stuff from the empire. As we can see, the system was not working during the last century because defeats at the hand of the Hephthalites caused a serious increase in taxes, because we constantly had to pay tribute to them, and that in turn led to the popularity of Mazdak and his, kill the rich message.
Yep. I get it, yeah.
Because, people would like to be comfortable, but if the taxes keep going up and you see this inefficiency and everything is really uncomfortable,
and the little that you're making gets taken away, and it's literally like what you need to survive, then
yeah, so it's terrible. Okay, Khosrow and Kavad, to give Kavad his credit, saw that this was a problem and they needed to fix it. They needed to reform how the empire works and reform its taxation first of all, and then a bunch of other matters. So first of all, Kavad sponsored a great survey of all the land and who owned it, and proposed a tax rate for each section of land based on the size of it and the type of crop being grown. So, if you're growing grain, this is how much you're paying in tax. If you're growing peas, this is how much you're paying in tax, and so on. And the nice part of this is that the state can now predict how much money is going to be made each year without having to fear a bad harvest. Because, you're paying me 100 kilos of grain in taxes, whether it's a good year or a bad year. So if it's a good year, hooray, you get to keep more. If it's a bad year, you're going to suffer a bit more, but the expectation is that you were saving for such a bad year.
I mean, yeah, but that means we need to start on a good year. If we start on a bad year,
Yes, we're starting the system on a reasonably good year, fortunately.
Okay.
It's not a terrible famine. We're starting on some normal years.
Okay, then it might be fine as long as people are being careful. Not ideal, but yeah.
And the important part for the state is that this allows the king to know, okay, this is exactly how much I'll have in taxes each year because the land in the empire is always the same. And it's basically moving the uncertainty from the king to the farmer who is, raising the crops. Also, in especially unusual cases, local judges could sort of deal with any anomalies that were happening. So they could request extra taxes, or maybe give out a return based on the local situation. So, if the people are really suffering, they can't survive, well then okay, the king will return some of the taxes to them, but at least it's something that the king knows of. This is also a great improvement over the previous case in noble lands, because previously the nobles would just say, yeah, this is how much the harvest was, trust me, bro.
Yeah, sure.
And now there's actually an inspector going to all the noble lands and checking how much land you own, and, based on your land, this is how much you owe the state. Also, Khosrow decided to change the poll tax by making sure that people would pay based on what they owned. So yes, you do have a tax just based on living in the empire, but if you are a different rank of person, you have to pay different amounts. Although there were also exemptions for certain people. So there were exemptions for nobles or other people who directly serve the king. So you're basically essentially paying taxes in service to the crown. Exemptions for people under 20 or above 50. And yeah, there were different levels of payment based on your social status, although certain scholars say that it was only for farmers or non-Zoroastrians. It's kind of unclear. It feels more likely that it was just for everybody, because having that many exemptions would be a bit strange, but who knows. The non-Zoroastrians thing is probably based on how this system will be adopted later by the Islamic caliphates, where they will impose an extra tax on people who aren't Muslim. And then we'll do that. But it would be kind of weird for Khosrow to do this, because most of the people in his empire are Zoroastrians, while in the caliphates, most people were not Muslims. So it made sense to tax them. But yeah, so this new proportionality allowed for an increase in state revenues, because rich people are paying you more. Hooray. And at the same time, it's a system that could be adapted and modified to provide certain incentives. So, if you want to make sure that more people sign up for the army, you remove their taxes, and they will do that. Also, like with the previous taxes, these are no longer gathered by nobles and middlemen, but taken directly by a royal tax collector that would report to Khosrow in person.
Probably better for avoiding corruption.
Yeah, absolutely. Then agriculture itself was encouraged by restoring landless farmers to the lands they had lost, paying them to set up their farms once again, and issuing funds in case of natural disasters. So a lot of people had recently lost their land due to the Mazdakite uprisings or wars or similar events. And Khosrow decided to just pay for them to go back to their lands and give them enough resources to get started back up.
Yeah, because that's going to pay off in the end.
Yeah, exactly. Because if they're just milling around starving, that's not going to be good for anyone. But if you give them the resources to get back up on their feet and start up a new farm, well, then you'll be getting taxes in the long run. So, win-win.
Yeah.
This was also the fact of having a lot of smaller farmers would allow for many smallholders as opposed to massive estates whose owners could easily bribe officials. Because the idea is that if you're a farmer of a few hectares of land, well, then you're less likely to be able to bribe an official than somebody who owns half of the country and has all that. So it's a much better system for the state again. And also in the aftermath of the Mazdakite uprisings, many lands that had been held from the nobles or great landholders had an unclear legal status, because the nobles were either dead or had left and nobody was sure who owned the land anymore. Khosrow just said, well, if nobody's sure, I'll just give it to random peasants, and they will be able to grow the land for me, and it's not going to be nobles.
If nobody knows, then I will assign them.
Yeah. And this was an extraordinarily effective way to do things, because the nobles would tend to be very inefficient in the government of their lands. They would, cultivate some of them, then forget others existed, or maybe use them for non-productive uses.
Yeah.
In the end, this was so productive that later Muslim historians would view this as a golden age where there were 4 times as many cultivated fields as during the Muslim conquest.
Oh, that's so awesome. Like, actually.
Yeah, that's very nice. And, it's giving food security to the people, a lot of job security to people who didn't have it otherwise. It's a very nice and stable system. Then Khosrow also commissioned the Mobedan Mobed, or the priest of priests, the head Zoroastrian leader, to investigate any issues present in the farming communities of the empire so that any injustices could be resolved by the king. In one story, we're told that Khosrow heard of a noble who was mistreating his subjects, abusing them and treating them poorly. So Khosrow decided to have the man flayed and use his stuffed skin as a warning to other nobles to behave and treat their tenants properly.
Okay, wait, like that.
Yes.
That is so intense. We're here like, okay, so we're, bettering bureaucracy, making some changes and logistics so that everything runs smoothly. Also, we're going to do this horrible thing to this man to use him as an example.
Yes.
Just absolutely unhinged.
That's what you get for abusing your tenants and being a terrible landlord.
Like, basically taxidermy this man and put his stuffed skin on display.
Yes. Remind people to be nice to their tenants. They are the ones who pay your livelihood.
Talk about being an artist. Imagine this being what you do for the king. Like, who do you call to, like,
Fair enough. There's probably some person who was called, hey, have you ever stuffed a noble before? Would you like to? But yeah, according to our historian Al-Masudi, Khosrow was known to have said, the throne rests on the army on the treasury on agriculture, agriculture on justice, justice on loyalty of the agents, and that on the trustworthiness of the ministers. But the base of all the edifice is the vigilance that the king has upon himself, and the control that he has upon his passions, so that he may govern them instead of being under their yoke. So everything is a careful house of cards that rests on itself.
Yep.
And it's really important that the king be wise and capable and understand how all this works and doesn't abuse his power.
I mean, yeah. Makes sense.
And yeah, why were we doing all these economic reforms? What is the point of gathering all this money? We have several things we want to do. Because the empire wants to have a constant safe supply of money, which would allow it to fight its internal and external enemies without the need of extraordinary taxes, because that's what would happen beforehand. If there was a war that's suddenly happening, an invasion or something, then the king would ask for extraordinary taxes, and, well,
you
again,
hope
if it's a
that
bad
people
harvest
deliver.
You're screwed. You don't know about this.
You hope that people deliver, and you, run the risk of ruining all of your farmers, because, yeah.
So the idea is that now we just have a constant input of money that everybody knows it's going to be the same forever and ever. So you can plan for it, and at the same time, the king can actually have the resources he needs to run the empire. These reforms would also form the backbone of the economic system of the caliphates that would rise after the fall of the Sassanids. And it's also worth mentioning that some of these systems resembled the Roman method. But whether this was a direct inspiration is still very hotly debated by different scholars.
I see.
Some say that, yes, it's so similar that they definitely, took inspiration. Others are saying, no, it's just kind of the logical thing to do, and Khosrow just went with that.
Sort of how pyramids appear in different parts of the earth, because, it's just a stable structure to build on.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a similar idea, but whether it was direct inspiration or not, unclear. Then Khosrow decided to change the structure of the army. He's been winning a bunch of wars. How did that go? Well, he decided to change how the army worked to provide the king with an elite heavy cavalry regiment that was regularly paid in cash and land holdings. Also, these did not depend on the nobles for its formation like before, but they were under the direct control of the king.
I see.
Yes, these horsemen were generally recruited from the minor nobility who wanted to work their way up. And unlike the greater nobles, who had their own armies and had their own regiments, these men in service of the king are no longer supplying all their own equipment, but Khosrow himself is making sure they meet a certain standard, and he provides them with anything that's missing.
I see.
So, in Al-Tabari, there is a fun anecdote about this, and also in the Shahnameh, where the army was being reviewed by a secretary of Khosrow's, and the king wasn't among the soldiers for inspection, because he's the king. He wasn't standing there. So the secretary sent a letter to the king asking to present himself for inspection to make sure that everything was up to code.
I see.
And then when the king was present among the soldiers, the secretary found that the king's equipment was lacking, so he gave him a coin to go and buy something to make
my
up for
god! Here, buy yourself something pretty.
Yes, exactly. Buy yourself some pretty armor. This is clearly not enough.
I mean, I think it's kind of cool that the king, was going with whatever he had and, didn't prioritize just giving himself the most out there equipment.
Yeah, he's saying that, okay, everybody should be the same, everybody should be equally set up, and the army should be regular and systematized. It shouldn't be just random people buying what they can and going to war with it. It should be everybody has the same equipment, or at least the same level of equipment, and then you can fight effectively. It also looks like some of the minor nobles that served in the army were settled in the border regions of the empire to better defend it. In a system that's kind of reminiscent to the later Roman theme system, although again, hotly debated whether there's any real connection. Also, the money that was going to the armies of the nobles would have to be carefully looked into to avoid any embezzling, which was apparently going on often.
Yeah.
With the king sometimes paying for soldiers that did not exist. So
I see,
try to check that the nobles actually have the amount of soldiers they're claiming to have and not messing them up.
Come on, guys.
And well, the idea is that if the king needed any further soldiers, they could be recruited from nomads living on the border, and they would hold off any invasions long enough that the royal army could arrive. So the idea is that there are a bunch of these minor nobles living on the border taking control of it.
Yeah.
But also, if there is an emergency, you can just recruit some of the local nomads to hold off whatever is coming until the king can get there. The main problem with this last plan is that it requires these nomads to work.
Yeah.
And that's not something you can easily plan for. And there's no clear idea of how long you will need them and how many you should expect to pay. It is an emergency situation, but it is a little bit of a gray area where you're unclear on
but I
what
guess
you should do.
that's what happens. It's not ideal, but if you really need it, then you risk it. Yeah.
And also, regarding this, it's interesting to note that Khosrow would select the finest warriors among rebels or foreign enemies and employ them in his own armies on borders far away from these people's homelands where they became effective aids to the imperial army. So if you capture some valuable Roman soldiers, you send them to fight the Turks in the east because they're good at their job, but you just make sure that they're far away from where they're originally meant to be so they don't switch sides. And as we also mentioned in Kavad's episode, there's no longer a supreme leader of all the armies, but command of the army is split into 4. One for each corner of the empire. So west is for facing the Romans, north is for facing the Caucasus, east is for the northern steppe, and south is for the lands east and south of Kabul. And all these report directly to the king, just like the nobles in charge of the border marches. So the idea is that now several noble families are also assigned to these border regions based on what land they traditionally owned, and they're the ones responsible of taking care of them. So it's sort of like Armenia was in the past, where you have just essentially a sub-king taking care of this area and making sure that it's
hopefully they won't
organized.
rebel.
Yes. This also acts not only as a military division, but as an administrative one, with Khosrow trying to appoint new men in these posts, but also having to rely on old nobles from time to time, which would result in certain positions becoming de facto hereditary, such as the governorship of the north for the Mihran family, the west for the Spabudan, and the east for the Karen.
Well, we tried.
We're doing what we can. Although he did try to assign nobles dominion over the lands of their rivals to ensure that they would never be able to relax, and they would always have to compete with each other and not the king himself.
Smart.
So, neat. But so what is the outcome of these reforms? Did they work? Did they not?
Yeah.
Well, different points of view.
Okay. Because so far it seems pretty good. On paper.
Yeah,
so
it's definitely all these reforms are things that seem like a good idea at the time. So we can see if there are any unknown consequences for where it could go.
Okay.
So first of all, the reforms greatly strengthened royal power against internal and external enemies by massively increasing royal independence, ballooning state revenue, and reducing the political role of the nobles. So overall, good, as you said. But there are some problems to it.
Okay.
Like, if you remember what Khosrow himself said about everything being based on the king not being corrupt and being competent and being skilled,
Yeah.
this depends on the king being strong and capable, not somebody who wants to just give out favors for short-term gain.
Yeah.
The expectation is that you're always going to have a Khosrow or a Kavad on the throne who knows what they're doing and knows how to take care of things.
I mean, that's really nice of them to think that that's going to be the case, but we've seen what happens.
Yeah, so it's a good system as long as the person in charge is good at it.
Yeah. There's no safeguards, truly.
Yeah, and, of course, Khosrow is going to try and choose the best person for his heir, but
if someone wants to abuse
happen,
this, they can,
Yeah. It could just be even like Shapur I who chose Hormizd I as his heir because he was the best of his sons, but then if he dies a year into his reign and you're stuck with the Bahrams, what are you doing?
What now?
Yeah. Next, the system was still subject to corruption, but since the state needed the same amount of money in each year, this would mean that in later decades, after Khosrow will be gone, there will be overall higher taxes for the common citizens. Because you're essentially paying an extra secret tax for the corruption that the middlemen are taking.
Yeah.
So, not ideal. And some scholars attribute the fall of the empire to this increased tax requirement, although I'm not fully convinced, but...
Yeah, that's a big, claim. But
yeah. Also, the new army is really cool and really strong and really well prepared, but it's also very expensive. And the king needs to make sure that they're all properly paid to avoid a Praetorian Guard situation and replacing the nobles with now a strong military which will try and overthrow you if they're not paid enough.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like in previous centuries, the head jobs were still being given to the great noble families, who were the top generals and administrators, although some sources do tell us that Khosrow tried as best as he could to have his ministers be salaried civil servants who owed their place to him and not family inheritance.
Yep.
So it's something that's
safer, but
trying to fix it. Like, if there's any talented non-nobles, he'll try and get them up to important positions because, they'll owe him for it and they don't have these family interests to follow. But again, speaking of, these reforms did not sit well with the formerly very privileged nobles who now have to be slightly privileged and not very privileged.
Well, guys, sucks to suck.
Yeah. And in the future, we'll see this problem because essentially it's argued in...
Goes to look for the book.
So as it's argued in The Decline and Fall of the Sasanian Empire by Parvanya Purshariati.
Check your sources.
Yes. Essentially, the idea is that the way the empire worked so far was that the nobles agreed that it was best to keep the Sassanids in charge because they were going to respect the privileges of the nobility.
Yeah.
And that having any other noble in charge would mess up the system and cause a great imbalance and chaos.
Yeah.
The problem with trying to get rid of the nobles is that this social contract is kind of broken.
Yeah.
Because essentially, the nobles now can ask themselves, okay, well, what do we have to lose with making one of us king?
Yeah.
If we're going to lose everything anyway, we might as well go out with a bang.
Yeah.
So, that will be important in future. We'll see how that goes.
I can't with the nobles. This podcast is radicalizing me.
I mean,
more. But the fact that we are rating kings, which is not much better. And yet, I'm like, God damn the nobility.
The kings at least have a job to do, and they do it. Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Nobles are just parasites. So, yes. But yeah, there's also an anecdote in Al-Tabari where Khosrow was a bit touchy about his reforms. Because in Altabari, we're told that a courtier told Khosrow that these economic reforms were flawed because he's considering the state of the land now and maybe it could change so that it's kind of causing later problems that would make the tax unfair in the future.
Yeah, so they they were aware. Or at least some people were like, hey.
Khosrow asked the man what his job was.
Oh boy.
The man replied he was a secretary. Khosrow then said, all right, then beat this man to death with inkwells.
No! Oh my god, Khosrow, please.
Yes. Harsh.
Like, how are you hoping to get good advice? I guess maybe it was unsolicited advice.
It could be. I mean, maybe in public you don't want to contradict the king. Anyway.
Yeah, no, of course. Damn.
But after this, Khosrow asked if anybody else had any objections.
And
they replied, "O king, we are in full agreement with the land tax that you are imposing on us." So, good to see everyone agrees now. Which is not great for his whole philosopher king vibe.
Yeah. You gotta know how to take criticism.
Yeah. I mean, this source was written a couple 100 years after this, 300 years after this happened, so.
Yeah.
Pinch of salt, but still. Not ideal.
Okay, so maybe it didn't even happen, so that's fine.
It could be. Who knows? But despite this negative ending note, it must be remembered that these were really important, sorely needed reforms, and that the empire was not doing well. It needed something to change. And that with these reforms, Khosrow was able to achieve everything his reign could achieve. The empire could not only hold its own against the enemies on its border, but also expand and enjoy a long period of economic prosperity and political stability. So it's working now. Everything is great.
Cool.
The empire is prospering more than it ever has before. But Zariel, war never changes.
It's always war, famine, or pestilence, isn't it?
Yes, true. I mean, we're going to see the end of the empire. All 4 horsemen of the apocalypse will appear. But hey, that's separate times. Because we can't forget that the Romans themselves are still around and our old friend Armenia still exists.
Right.
Because by this point, Justinian had died. So hooray, that's one less problem. And he'd been succeeded by the younger Justin II, who wanted to prove himself. He was a young emperor. He wanted to say, why are we still paying this money to the Sassanids? Why was Justinian so weak accepting this? We should just stop paying this tribute and go back to the good old days where we're not paying and be our own persons.
Sure. So time to go to war then.
Yes, so 572, a revolt broke out in Armenia against the Sassanid government, where the Suren governor had apparently been trying to spread Zoroastrianism. So, in reaction to this, the Romans refused to send their agreed-upon tribute and instead sent aid to the Armenians and called the Turks to invade Iran. So the Romans first tried to attack the city of Nisibis, this great border city in Mesopotamia. But disagreements between the generals resulted in the failure of that siege.
So it was just management misunderstanding, not even a military defeat.
It was just very poor management.
Wow.
They were apparently so poorly organized that the Sassanids left the gates of the city open, daring the Romans to come on if they think they're hard enough. And the Romans just retreated, abandoning their siege weapons for the Sassanids to collect.
Wow.
So, not very well made at all. The Sassanids then responded to this by besieging and capturing the twin of Nisibis, this new city that Justinian had built, the city of Dara. And Khosrow's forces just took the Roman siege equipment they left outside Nisibis and turned it on Dara. And they managed to conquer this city, which had been a great bastion of Roman defense. And with the door open, the Sassanids just flooded into Syria where they could attack freely, and they attacked the remains of Antioch once again, and the Sassanid army took many captives back to Mesopotamia. This defeat was so bad that the Roman Emperor Justin is said to have gone insane for the rest of his reign.
Yeah.
He was said to have frequently made chicken noises or other animals, and to run away to hiding under his bed because the bogle was coming for him.
Oh my god.
So...
I guess when you put that much pressure into proving yourself, and then it happens.
Yes, and then you dramatically fail at everything. It's like, oh, well damn.
I guess I don't want to be a person anymore. I'll just be a chicken.
Yeah, that's it. Just gonna stop.
Cope.
There were some attempts at brokering a peace with the Roman emperor's wife basically being in charge together with a prominent general, Tiberius II. So the Romans at one point sent 200 kilos of gold for a 1-year truce to just deal with the fact that their emperor was now no longer of his own mind. And so the emperor's wife said that it would be dishonorable for a great king like Khosrow to wage war on a defenseless woman such as her, who was left in charge of the empire.
So we're playing that card.
Yeah. However, only 1 year was enough. So Khosrow himself was now around 80 years old, decided to personally lead his army into Armenia to finish this. So the peace talks that were going on with the Romans were interrupted after a great Sassanid victory in Armenia. But that fortune would not be constant, because the Romans managed to conquer some Armenian fortresses, while Khosrow ended the Armenian rebellion with a general amnesty. He said, okay, anybody who was rebelling, it's fine. This has gotten out of hand. This governor wasn't doing what I wanted him to. I'm generally tolerant of Christians.
Yeah.
Let's just pretend nothing
like,
happened.
Genuinely, you have a point and you have no reason to rebel. I will, hear your demands.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Or, you had a good reason to rebel and, yeah, we can work it out.
Yeah.
Which, yeah.
Unfortunately for Khosrow himself, the Roman defenses were too strong for the old king, so he was forced to retreat back to Mesopotamia. With an especially bad route across the Euphrates that Khosrow only survived by crossing the river on the back of an elephant, with a lot of the baggage train being lost.
Oof.
According to one source, Khosrow was so ashamed of the situation that he decreed that no Iranian king should personally lead his men into battle, but actually just trust generals that knew what they were doing, unless he had to fight against another king and then honor demanded it.
I mean, I don't know. Skill issue, you know?
Yeah. I mean, the man is also 80. It's
Yeah. I think you should add to that,
dude,
when you are
rest.
elderly, maybe don't go into battle.
Yes, when you're elderly, it's probably okay if you tell somebody else to do the job.
Maybe let the
You don't have to
youngins
micromanage
do
everything.
the
I
thing.
know you're very skilled at this. I know you managed to conquer Antioch and transport it, but, it's okay, my dude.
That was so impressive.
Yeah. At the same time, it's also possible that the Turks had begun attacking the eastern frontier, which made the whole affair much more difficult to deal with. So it looks like Khosrow managed to defeat the Turks in battle personally, because he was fighting another king, so law applies. But then he finally agreed that, you know what, he's too old for this. I'm done, please.
Yeah.
He paid them for peace. He said, okay, have this lump sum of money.
Yeah.
It's okay. The war's ending anyway.
That's fair, you know?
Yeah,
it's fine.
Fair enough. At this point, peace negotiations started to formalize this new situation. They sent negotiators to the Romans to say, okay, how do we organize this peace? Do we get to keep some land? What do you get to keep? Trying to discuss this. And it was during these negotiations that Khosrow got a chest infection, while a deal was being made for the Romans to retreat from all of Armenia. And they were still arguing over whether the Sassanids could keep the fortress of Dara, which was the entrance to Syria, or if the Romans could have it back, despite not having reconquered it. But in the end, Khosrow died in Ctesiphon in February or March of 579, before the Roman embassy could arrive for peace.
No.
Yeah.
This is gonna up the treaty.
Yes. According to Roman historian Agathias, the one who thought Khosrow was pretty smart for a barbarian, I guess.
I guess.
Khosrow died of heartbreak after seeing the smoke from Roman raids near where he was in Armenia. Although the fact that he was in Ctesiphon, according to our local sources, probably makes it
Listen,
unlikely
guys,
to
you
be
can
true.
write your fan fictions, but don't pass them off as history, okay? We know that you're obsessed with us. I understand. We're really cool, but come on.
Well, the succession is important, so Khosrow decided to be succeeded by his son Hormizd IV. Although some sources say that Khosrow preferred another son, and that Hormizd was actually the choice that the nobles preferred. And Khosrow decided, you know what, sure, I don't have the strength to fight this. Hormizd will do.
I guess he wasn't too terrible, so he was okay.
Yeah. Although other sources say that Khosrow chose Hormizd because, if you remember, Hormizd was the son of a Turkic princess.
Yeah.
And so the hope was that he could make peace with the Turks and come to a better understanding in future.
And they wouldn't cause problems.
Yeah. And also, another point is that as the son of a Turkic princess, Hormizd technically outranked all of Khosrow's other sons.
I see.
So, being of pure royal blood on both sides of his family, that meant he was the best of all the potential heirs. So that's an option. At the end, in the Shahnameh, Khosrow told his son before dying the following words. He said, "This world is faithless and filled with sorrow, hardship, pain, and adversity. And whenever you are happy here, and your heart is free of sorrow, and you rejoice in your life, remember that you must leave this fleeting world."
Okay, so never be happy, because
yes, which
things
is kind
are
of a
going to
downer
be bad
message.
at some point.
Yeah.
I don't like this, man.
It's not
That's
a great
not good.
message,
Yeah.
but I guess he was feeling a bit down with the whole dying of a chest infection.
Remember that no matter how hard you try, things will be shit.
Yes, memento mori.
Memento mori is supposed to be a thing that, like, you whisper to someone who's on the top of the world, not,
I mean, he is whispering this to his son who is about to become king.
Yeah, but
so I guess it's kind of there.
I guess.
It's kind of saying, like, remember that
hardship awaits.
Just don't go for the fleeting quick pleasures. Remember that hardship is the rule of the world, and you should make sure that it's reduced as much as possible.
Okay.
But he then goes on to recommend to his son that he be patient, alert, honest, do good, and be just. And so died Khosrow I, who had so greatly influenced the fate of his empire that he would be considered the ideal king by later Islamic literature.
Wow. I mean, yeah, he did do everything, so that's amazing.
Yeah. And he was so famous that his name would become the title used in Arabic for Sassanid rulers. Like Caesars in Rome, the Arabic historians would later write about the Khosrows of the Sassanid Empire who ruled it.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's pretty influential. And yeah, not only that, but later Islamic empires would draw their administrative base from his reformed Sassanid Empire. Also, the historian Agathias, again, who was very condescending to Khosrow, he still said that it could be hardly claimed that even Cyrus the son of Cambyses, or Darius the son of Hystaspes, or for that matter the famous Xerxes who opened up the seas to cavalry and the mountains to shipping, would stand in comparison to him.
Wow. Yeah, that's very, it's putting him up there. Wow.
Yeah, so according to Agathias' ranking, he ranks above Cyrus, above Darius, above Xerxes.
Well,
which is pretty ambitious.
Yeah.
I guess we'll judge if that's true or not, but yeah.
I mean, our ranking is a bit, skewed. It's not only about being a good king, but I don't know.
Yeah, but if he gets a Shah at the end, he will go on to final rounds with Darius and Xerxes and Cyrus, who are all Shahs according to our rating. So, yeah. So, Serial, thoughts about Khosrow I?
Man, I need to re-listen to these episodes once we're done. Like, so many things happened.
Yes, a lot of things happened.
It was really awesome. Like, I love when people take the reins of the empire and actually try to make things better, make changes to, like, improve the situation.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me happy. So, yeah, let's see how he does. Let's rank him.
Yeah, so let's rate our boy Khosrow I and see how he does. So our first category is final moments. How interesting was his death? Dying at 80-ish of a chest infection.
I mean, interesting that he got that death. Old.
Yeah, that's nice. Right? Good. Not
the most interesting death, I guess.
No, not especially. There's just like, it's interesting that we sort of know the cause and, he doesn't fade away. We just know something about it. We have a deathbed speech to his son to, not get cocky and not enjoy the throne too much because remember that terrible things can always happen. So we get something like that. But yeah, I'm not terribly high up, but I can imagine like a couple points. What are your thoughts?
I would give it some points for like dying so old.
Mm-hmm.
But, like a 2 maybe.
Yeah, I was also wondering. Yeah, I think a 2 is a fair amount. It's okay.
It's not an
nothing
impressive
to-
death. It's like he got sick and died, right? Like,
Yeah, it's impressive that he got this
like
far,
the interesting
considering
part
how
was
his
that it was
ancestors
very
ended.
like at a point where it's really unfortunate.
Yeah. So with a 2 and a 2, he gets a 2 out of 10 for final moments. Our next category is battle hardness. How good was he at war and fighting? We have a lot of things here. So, let's go chronologically. First, he defeated his brother during the Civil War at the Succession, defeated in battle, won. Then he had this war against Justinian. He conquered Antioch, transported it away. To be fair, he didn't have much resistance because Belisarius was far away at the time. And then in this war, he sort of fought the Romans to a standstill and forced them to pay tribute. Pretty good.
Yeah.
In the east, he destroyed the Hephthalites. They're not there anymore. Again, in fairness, the Turks helped a lot with that, but Khosrow managed to help destroy the great rival of his family that had humiliated the empire under Peroz 3 times. Remember, Peroz just kept coming back,
Yeah, true.
trying to defeat the Hephthalites and always lost. Khosrow just wiped them off the map now.
Yeah.
Khosrow then decided to invade Yemen, conquered that. That's part of the empire now. And then he had his last war with Justin, which he won so hard that Justin lost his mind and started making chicken noises.
That was, that is a big win.
Yeah.
I feel sorry for Justin, but
Yeah, you feel bad for the man, but still, it's a, on our side, win. So he had all that. And then we're told that he often led in battle personally. He was often on his own, fighting with his men, even up to 80 years old. Like, he defeated the Turks when he was 80. The man is pretty hardcore.
Yeah.
On the downside, he did sort of lose a battle at the end that was so bad that he made this law that the king couldn't do this anymore.
Yeah, but he was like 88 or something. So like,
Yeah, fair.
I am willing to let that be.
Yeah, I also agree that it's like, we can concede this to this man. And then secondly, the fact that when he's fighting with Justinian, he wins really hard in Antioch when most of the Roman forces are off in Italy.
Yeah.
When a lot of the Roman forces are back in the east, they fight to a standstill.
Yeah.
But to be fair, seeing how the last Roman war goes, this is more a merit of Justinian and Belisarius in fighting him than a demerit in Khosrow just not being very good. Like, when he's faced with a much lesser man, he could just wipe the floor with him.
Yeah.
But when faced with Justinian and Belisarius,
Yeah, like I feel like
he's their
losing
equal,
to them is
essentially.
not really
Yeah, and it's not even losing, it's just like tying. It's not dishonor.
it's
or
not
anything.
dishonorable. Yeah. Agreed.
So that is the slight demerit. In my head, I think this is roughly a 9. Yeah, also in battle hardness, it might be something else to consider, but he reforms the army to make it more effective and work better. He introduces stirrups to the empire. That's pretty cool.
True.
You can now have more intense cavalry charges because you can hold onto your horse better.
Hold on to your horses.
So that's cool. And yeah, so I think that, again, I think this is sort of like Darius the Great, where he did a lot of great things, but wasn't like a perfect record. So I'd go for a 9.
That is fair. I think I will join you in that because it is really impressive. And of course things happen. Like, not everything was perfect. But to be honest, nothing to be ashamed of at all. Like, something to brag about, actually. Because...
Yeah, exactly. It's not like, an Alexander the Great who never saw defeat.
Yeah.
But
like, how
he
many
won
do
often
that,
enough, And he did it for, decades of actually holding an empire together.
Yeah.
It happens that you might lose a couple battles from time to time. I think it's fair. So, yes, I'm going to go with a 9. And if you match with a 9 and a 9, we get an 18 out of 20 for battle hardness. Which doesn't get him into the top 5, but just afterwards.
I mean, 18 out of 20 is pretty damn good.
Yeah, it's nothing to sneeze at. Our next category is scheminess. How good was he at plots and manipulations?
Well, he did do a little bit of that. We haven't had many kings who, dabble into it.
No. So he had several components of this. First of all, he engaged in this fake history writing the Letter of Tansar.
Yeah.
Where the idea is that he compiled the religious history of the empire, and he sort of probably forged this letter to Ardashir I saying, hey, you know all the reforms that Khosrow is going to do in 300 years? That's how the empire should be and how it always was.
Yeah.
And that's how things are meant to be in real life.
Like, making your self-justification retroactively.
Yeah, he's basically saying this is what the founding fathers would have wanted.
It
so
was
of course I'm doing it
prophesized.
right.
Yeah.
Yes,
it was
pretty
always
much.
in the books.
So that's pretty high for scheminess.
Yeah.
It's not Darius levels of saying, I was right all along, shut up, nothing has changed. I'm actually just returning things to how they're meant to be, but the spirit is there.
But almost, yeah.
That's pretty good. Then, what else do we have in scheming? So he stopped a noble rebellion.
Mm-hmm.
We know that the nobles tried to put a son of Jamasp, so his nephew, on the throne.
Yeah.
But he managed to counteract it before it came to fruition and stopped it, so that's part of scheminess in there. Yeah, it depends how much you want to put for scheminess here, but he managed to eradicate the Mazdakites by eliminating all their leadership at once. He invited them all to a council, defeated them all in a debate, then had them all killed.
I was gonna say it wouldn't count as much as scheminess, but the fact that it was, like, he invited them under false pretense does count.
Yeah, I mean, you can argue how much he invited them under false pretenses, it's just like, he'd recently suppressed a Mazdakite rebellion, so you could have guessed, but, he did invite them there, and once they all lost their debate, well, I'm sorry, you're all getting killed.
Yeah, that feels, like inviting your rivals to a hunting dinner.
Yeah. Then scheminess, again, it depends how you want to see it, but you could say that in some of his reforms, he is trying to manipulate his way out of owing stuff to the nobles. He is trying to empower people who are lower down in the social ladder to raise them up into the court, and in the meantime push down the nobles as much as he can, try and, play the political game.
Yeah.
To give more power to his
I guess that can be a point. Like, I don't think it's
ones.
huge, but,
No, exactly. So overall, I think those are the main ones. I don't know if anything else comes to mind for you.
Not right
now. But, what would you rate all these together?
Maybe like a 4 or 5. I'm not going to go super high.
I was wondering if a 5 or a 6, because I think the whole rewriting history for his own purposes is pretty big.
Is pretty big, yeah. True.
And then you have, all the rest, it's not massive. I don't think it's his main skill.
Yeah.
But it's not his dump stat either. So I'm going to say a 6 after
Then I'll
all.
go for
I'm going to say a 5 for the whole political situation and a 6 for like the extra little suppressing rebellions and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so with a 6 and a 5, he gets an 11 out of 20 for scheminess.
Not bad.
Our next category is shock factor. How shocking was this man?
I mean,
there's a lot of things.
Me.
So first of all, during the succession, the Romans support his brother. He kills his brother and all his supporters. Kills all of his brothers, all of them.
Yeah.
Because just in case they might rebel.
Yeah.
And then blood-soaked, he asks the Romans for peace. You enjoyed that scene.
Yeah.
He kills all the Mazdakites. He kills tens of thousands of them, according to certain sources, stopping them from being a force at all. And he presents a garden of people buried alive to Mazdak before having him executed. That's pretty messed up.
Yeah.
What else does he do? He then breaks the eternal peace. That's not great. He then takes Antioch and moves it to his empire and makes Khosrow's better Antioch.
No, that is excellent. Like,
That's great.
That is stuff. So good.
Congratulations. So he does all that.
Yep.
He then tries to suppress the nobles. That's pretty intense. That's pretty powerful. He has that noble flayed and displayed as a scarecrow for other nobles to take care of their farmers next time.
Oof.
So, pretty harsh as well. We also have the story where he has that secretary beaten to death with inkwells for criticizing his reforms. That's not ideal. And then as other things, there's just the whole reforming the empire thing. He decides to just rework it in his own image so that it will work properly and the nobles won't have as much power as they used to, and it will run smoothly according to him. He also manages, you could also see how shocking you want to see that he invites the Turks to destroy the Hephthalites. That was a decision that has, mixed consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Because, it's useful in the moment, but how long term will it actually be? Who knows?
Yeah.
So that's partially it. And then what else does he do? He does kill his son in a rebellion. But, it's unclear if he kills his son in the rebellion. There are multiple options. He might have had his son's eyelids branded after the rebellion, or the son died in battle. You could see. But, yeah, those are his levels for shock factor. How high up is that for you?
The moving an entire city is so, I love this. I love it so much.
It's just great. Just because he could.
It's
and
such
when
a
that
flex.
guy said he missed the tree in front of his house, he just had the tree moved. So, yeah. Also you have the fact that going to Seleucia or Laodicea, I can't remember, but basically having games performed and him acting as the Roman emperor and making sure Justinian's team loses.
Yeah.
That's also just fun. So he has a lot of that. He does a lot of interesting things. So yeah, how would you rate it? How shocking is this overall? Because there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of political shocking, there's a lot of family side.
I guess I'll go for a 7, maybe?
Yeah, I was in that ballpark. I was in 7 or 8. Because we both gave Kavad 8 for the whole, communist revolution and then suppressing it and all that. Is Khosrow that level? We have a lot more stories of Khosrow being personally bloody. Khosrow does kill every brother he has.
True.
I think I'm going to match Kavad for Khosrow. I'm going to give him an 8. Are you going to stick with your 7?
Yeah. Yeah, I am.
Okay, fair enough. So with an 8 and a 7, he gets a 15 out of 20 for shock factor, making him, just under his father Kavad. Our next category is Aaron Shine. How good was he for the Empire in general and Iran in particular?
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Let's go.
Well, he has innumerable achievements. So,
yeah.
Just for achievements on a map, the Hephthalites are gone. They will never again threaten us. That is an extra bit of security that we have.
Lovely.
He conquers Yemen. We have all of the Silk Road now. We have all the middle of the Silk Road. Nobody passes without our knowledge or say so. That's pretty
huge,
cool.
Yeah.
In the west, he manages to conquer some lands on the border with Armenia and with Syria. Those are some not massive gains, but some notable gains. He greatly weakens the Romans. He takes the population of Antioch, which had about 500,000 people, and moves it to his empire. Now there are citizens.
Yeah. That's one way of annexing something.
Yep, fair enough. So that's what we have on a map. Then internally, what does he do? He keeps the empire stable for decades. It is orderly, it is safe. He manages to suppress the rebellions of one of his sons and of his brother. He suppresses another coup, according to his nephew, by the nobles. So he manages to keep the empire stable and orderly. Well, he then stops the Mazdakite uprisings. He massacres a bunch of people, but they had rebelled, so...
What you gonna do? You know.
Who hasn't? But on the other hand, he isn't a fundamentalist. He tolerates Christians, and he says that they can do kind of what they want. In Khosrow's Better Antioch,
much better, yeah.
There is a Christian bishop governing the city because everybody's Christian and they can do whatever they like. It's fine. That's pretty good. He founds the Academy of Gondishapur, which will be the basis for the House of Wisdom in the Islamic Golden Age. He gathers smart people from east and west and all across the empire and puts them in one place to study and learn. And, they make great strides in medicine, for example. That's very important for the empire. So that's going to be very good. Then on the administrative level, he gives a lot of fields to people who were otherwise deprived of their fields. He takes lands from the nobles, or lands that were questionably noble lands, and gives them to smallholders, who can now have control of their lands and make sure that everything is under control and that they're not being pursued by their landowners. He also tries to make sure that the landowners take care of their tenants and that they don't abuse them and don't abuse their power.
As they should.
So that's good. He then decides to reform most of the empire. He reforms the taxation system so that the state will now have a known amount of revenue for each year. So that's very good for planning things in the future. He strips some power from the nobles. He creates a new version of the army, which is more stable, more powerful, and more orderly overall. And yeah, he commissions massive building projects in Ctesiphon. He commissions the Take Khosrow, which is gloriously decorated with mosaics from across the empire and art from artists from all around. He builds a wall in the north, which is larger than Hadrian's Wall, to try and stop any nomads from having any incursions into the empire. Overall, the empire is doing a lot better than
I was gonna ask, after all of these reforms, like, did they actually help the empire? Did they work for a while? Even if they were flawed?
For as long as Khosrow lived, the empire was prosperous and doing great.
Amazing.
Like, it, again, the Muslim historians say it was a golden age where you had 4 times as many cultivated lands in the same region as opposed to when they were around. So that's very good. The only thing you could say, well, a couple bad things you could say against him is that, well, he does do a lot of purging the Manichaeans and the nobles at the beginning of his reign. Not the Manichaeans, the Mazdakites.
Yeah.
And he does, again, it's not his fault, but he ends his reign with a war still ongoing.
Yeah, I mean,
which his son will have to deal with now.
But he appoints an heir, and, like, you know, everything is pretty much, like, as good as it could be, except for that, like, unresolved war.
Yeah, pretty much. And this is an unresolved war that they're winning handily.
Yeah.
So it's not like the Romans are at the gates of Ctesiphon about to bash down the doors. You know, they're losing, their emperor has gone mad.
Yeah.
You'd expect the heir to be able to handle this.
Will he? I mean, we would expect
we'll find out next time. You know. But yeah, so what is your plan for Aaron Shine? I'm going in very high numbers. I think, at least for me, the only question is it a 9 or is it a 10?
I feel like with everything that he's done, we should agree with the scholars, did you say Arabic scholars?
Yes.
And, you know, consider this a golden age and go for a 10. Because, well, I guess not everything was perfect, but, like, you know, for as much as one man can do.
Yeah, I mean, as the person in charge, he tried to make sure everything worked as best as possible. And tried to make sure that everybody living in his empire lived well and comfortably.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'll go for a 10. I like him.
Yeah, I
Good
agree.
priorities.
So, with a 10 and a 10, he gets a 20 out of 20 for Aaron Shine. Our next category is Face of Faces. What do you think this man looked like? And let me send you his crown. He has only 1 crown. And also, strangely enough, for such a golden age, he doesn't have much art about him. But my personal hypothesis, which could be entirely wrong, is that since it's so recent to the end of the empire, it was probably all melted down somehow and reused. But who knows?
Maybe. Or, like, it just didn't reach us.
Yeah. Okay, so Sarah has finished their drawing. Let me pick it up and I'll describe it to you all.
Enjoy.
That's so cute. It's so good. I love it. Okay, so what we have essentially 2 separate scenes. On the top scene, there are some Romans with big, chibi anime eyes looking at a hole with a bunch of question marks, wondering what happened, looking very, very sad at the whole situation. And down below, we have our boy Khosrow, beautiful beard, beautiful hair, crown with a big poof on the bottom and a little ball on the head and a half moon in the front and crenellations to the side, dressed in the typical robe, carrying with himself the lovely city of Antioch, with a bunch of walls, an aqueduct, amphitheater, temple, and everything that you'd expect from a typical Roman city.
Yoink!
And bring it all the way home, saying, "Who's a barbarian now?"
I think this is such
Roman's
a
headache.
flex. Like, I'm sorry, but it
It is
seems
great.
out of a fantasy novel. The fact that he's like, we'll
It
just take the
absolutely
city. Like, what?
What are you gonna do? Stop me?
Oh,
So there we go. Thank you, Serial. That's a lovely drawing.
you're welcome.
If anybody wants to check this out, you can go to the episode notes in the description, on the Discord if you're a patron, or on our website in Serial's Portrait Gallery. Now let me show Sarah what he actually looked like according to the center of a decorative plate, which is, different from usual.
Ooh. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, because you said that we don't have much art of him, sadly.
No, unfortunately not as much. These later kings, there's less because, I assume it was probably all more readily available and melted down.
Are we approaching a catastrophe? Is that why?
I mean, the podcast is going to end soon.
Right, right.
We got like 12 episodes left. We had a whole
like,
prophecy
even if
of
we
doom.
do okay.
Yes. Like, even if we're doing fine now, soon we will emphatically not be doing fine.
Sad. Okay, so... Yeah, this is really pretty, actually. It's a plate, and on the outside, it's a rim of gold with, like... I guess it's gems or crystals, like, embedded.
It looks like inlaid precious stones.
Yeah, so pretty. And the center is more silver-colored. I don't know if it's silver or some other metal. And it has the engraving of front-facing Khosrow. Like a full body sitting on the throne that is like a reclining chair almost. Like it's long and has a back piece to it. And it has these winged horses as the feet of the throne, which I think I've seen before because I think I've drawn that before.
Yes.
He's wearing really pretty outfit, like the sort of robes that I've been drawing in all of these drawings, but like you can see the pattern on it, which is like little three-way like knots or loops, like Celtic loops almost, and some decorations, and he's holding a staff, I guess.
Yeah, I can't tell if it's a sword or some sort of staff, but
also really like intricately decorated. The pants also have all of the folds to them, which
I love how wavy they are.
Yeah.
They're very, very fancy.
And then you can see his curly hair and the beard, the crown from the front, which is cool. And on the sides, the diadem ends, I guess, like billowing behind him. Really cool. I like this. It's a fun, very detailed representation.
Yeah, it's a nice portrait. We don't often get front-facing things usually.
Yeah.
And also in previous plates were mostly like action shots during hunting.
Mm-hmm.
This is mostly just the king sitting.
He's
in
just
state
sitting
being
there.
The king.
Yeah.
Yeah, sitting there judging you silently.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what do you think about this? How
I
would you
like
rate
it. I think it gets his vibe across, of being like the overachiever, serious king who is like reforming the entire government system. I like it. And it is contemporary, right? So like,
yeah.
I mean, artistically wise, we've had more like impressive things, but this is really nice. I think I'll go for like maybe a 7 or so. 7 or 8.
Yeah, I think I might go for an 8 because I like it. It's original. It's new. I think he looks very good. I like the whole how the clothes
I love the
are defined.
details. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it's nothing never seen before. But
yeah,
I think it's pretty good. I'll head for an 8. How about you?
Yeah, I'll go for an 8 as well.
8 as well. Very
yeah.
well. So with an 8 and an 8, we get a 4 out of 5 for Face of Faces. Our next category is lengthiness. How long do you think this man reigned?
Well, he was like 80-something or 90 when he died.
Yeah, around 80. It's unclear because we're not sure about his exact birth date, but
so
thereabouts.
I forget when he came into power, but I assume relatively young. So I will say 50 years?
Very close, 48.
Yeah. Amazing.
So he reigned from 531 to 579 for a total of 48 years, which is... in our top 5 length of reign, he is just behind Shapur II, who was, 70 years, and Diakis, who is semi-mythical anyway, so...
yeah.
How much...
Take it with a grain of salt, yeah.
So yeah, 48 divided by 10 gives us a 4.8 out of 5 for lengthiness. And that brings us to the final score, which is a very impressive 74.8 out of 100,
Wow.
putting him in 3rd place overall under Shapur II and just above Antiochus the Great.
I mean, that tracks, yeah?
He did a good job. The only ones above him are Darius the Great and Shapur II. So,
So we agree with Arabic
job,
historians.
Yeah. I mean, yes, we agree that he surpassed... I mean, we don't agree that he surpasses Darius.
No.
At least according to our rating, he is
But
still
he's up
under
there.
Darius, but he does surpass Cyrus and Xerxes. He surpasses every Parthian king, every Seleucid king, and then is only surpassed by Shapur and Darius, which also hard acts to follow up.
Yeah.
So yeah, brilliant for Khosrow. And that leads us to the final question, which is to say, is he Khosrow's better Antioch enough? Is he reformer enough? Is he aged enough to be a Shahanshah, or is he just a Shahanah?
No, we have to give it to him. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think there's no way. I mean, even just the story of Khosrow's better Antioch on its own would probably be enough to make me remember.
Better Antioch, which is actually just Antioch, but in a better place.
Yes. So even just that would be a lot, but he's gonna work out. So congratulations, Khosrow. You can go into the Paradise Gardens and meet Kavad the First, your father, and tell him that you two did a pretty good job. Like, you kicked your father out of 5th place, but you're both in the top 10. That's a damn good family.
Yeah, damn.
So, very good. And that is the end of our episode. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this 2-parter on Khosrow the First. And, well, next time you'll be listening to Hormizd the Fourth. See how he does. Do you think he'll be able to keep up the streak? Are we going to have, like, a 3rd amazing king? Or is it going to be like, not as good?
Well, I would love it if we did have an amazing king. But, like you said before, the podcast has to end relatively soon.
I mean, it is going to end in 12 episodes, and to be fair...
Okay, 12 is... Yeah, okay. That's not imminent.
Yeah, I mean, 12 episodes before the end of Darius III, we were at Cambyses II. So,
yeah,
you know, we were just after Cyrus. So there is space for things to go wrong, but hey.
Then let's hope. It would make me happy.
Yeah. But anyway, in the meantime, if you'd like to support us, there are many ways to do that. You can join our Patreon, where we just released an episode on Pompey the Great. You get access to a bunch of other extra episodes. There's going to be an episode on Odenathus to be released before the end of the new year. And right now we're voting on what the next miniseries is going to be. So if you want to have a say in that, please join our Patreon. We will be voting from now until the 15th-ish of December, thereabouts. I might leave it an extra day. But yeah, if you want to get heard and get access to all the other extra episodes that we've had so far, please do. It's fun and we enjoy it. If instead you'd rather not support us monetarily, we still appreciate it if you could leave us a review on your podcast app of choice, because it lets other people know that we exist.
Yeah, just tell people about us.
Yeah, decides to give us a go. You know, maybe you can tell them to listen to your favorite episode. Look at all the Shahanshahs, tell them to start from one of those, because those are generally the better episodes.
Yep.
And
You know.
I'm told we didn't get our style in the first few episodes, but it eventually goes there, so hey. Who knows?
Yeah, choose one of your favorites and make them listen to it.
Yes.
Force them. No, don't do that.
But yeah, I think that's all from our side. So we hope you have a lovely week, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.